Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Admit everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to our Career Impact webinar. We're just waiting for a few more audience participants to show up and get to critical mass before we get going. Get started at 8:03.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Saif.
Mervin, congratulations.
Hi, Saif. How are you? Thank you.
How does it feel?
Good. But I guess I miss you guys. That's why I'm back here.
Can't get enough. Well, hey, good evening, everyone. While we're giving congratulations to one of our graduates here, we'd like to welcome you to our Career Impact webinar for the Asia School of Business. My name is Sean Ferguson. I'm the Associate Dean here at the Asia School of Business, and really excited to be talking to you about this topic. I think careers are, one of the motivating factors for most people to consider an MBA. And we wanted to tell you our perspective and point of view on why the investment in the program is worth it. And so, as some of you may already know, we have a very intimate culture here at the business school. And so the distance between the dean's level and the student level is very small. We're very collegial. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email if you have any questions. At the end of the call, at the end of this webinar, I'll also put up a schedule call. And so before I get started, I also like to introduce some of our team members who are here. We have Deputy Director Juliana Roth. Jules has been at ASB now for almost 3 years. And she joined us from the United States after a distinguished career at Emory University's Wayzata Business School. And most of her career has been focused on working with high potential working professionals like yourselves. And if you join our program, she will be the face of your interaction on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. We also have Saif Ismail. He's our Associate Director of Corporate Development, who's responsible for really leading our efforts with engagement with the corporate community in Malaysia and beyond. I think we have Nabila, who also works with Jules on the program team. Krutiga, she also helps us with corporate development. And Hamid is the DJ on the ones and twos on the admissions, ASB admissions slide. So he even looks like a DJ with the headphones on. So that's my main man from way back. So we're excited to be here. And, we think these are unprecedented times. The COVID environment has made for a challenging environment for everyone. And what we're seeing, we've had tons of info sessions, we've had tons of different webinars, coffee chats, whatever, and high potential MBA-WP applicants are facing an even more demanding workload. We recognize that you guys are, the backbone of your organizations, and while you're thinking about it in MBA, the work has never been greater. Many of the applicants that we've seen come through the process over the last 2 cycles are, always wondering, is there even time to do an MBA with a job, right? But one of the things with my experience, Jules' experience, it's actually in these times a down cycle, not an up cycle, where the ROI for an MBA from a transformative, top-notch school can, be even greater. And a high quality MBA will position you for unprecedented career success in the face of unprecedented opportunities. And as COVID-19 has evolved, it's been disruptive for brands, products, modes of business, and being equipped for the skills to take advantage of those opportunities is what our MBA program is all about. And if you think about where Asia sits in the global kind of recovery, it's at the front of the line and is setting the pace. This was from a presentation from The Economist earlier in the year, and Asia is clearly leading the way. And because of the prevalence of the vaccine in the US, it's kind of caught up. But this is the part of the world that's really dictating the recovery for the rest of the globe. From a policy perspective, whether it's fiscal or monetary, the rebalancing of the various sectors because of the proliferation of different digital models and such have really put Asia at the forefront. But one of the challenges that Asia was facing even before COVID is that there was going to be a significant talent deficit by 2030. Some of this is due to the aging workforce of some of the advanced economies and economies like in mainland China, where they had the one-child policy. But then there's just not enough skill in the workforce, right? And so while a lot of Southeast Asia has made a lot of progress when it comes to primary and secondary education, it takes a generation or multiple generations to kind of harvest human capital. And so, there's not enough skill in the workforce, and it's not ready to be harvested yet. And when you factor that in with the changing nature of the skills in the workforce from Industry 4.0, the environment is very kind of scarce for the kind of talent that's needed for where the world wants to go from a growth perspective. In a recent study from Deloitte, job tenures, their research showed that job tenures continue to shorten, and the half-life of a skill is declining rapidly, 5 years for the half-life of a skill. And for technical skills, it's even shorter, like something like programming or highly technical skills, it's as low as 18 months. You compound that with what QS recently did a survey of employers about the skills gap. And if you look at kind of these skills, employers are generally dissatisfied with a lot of critical skills such as problem solving, resilience, communication, flexibility, all these things that are really in high demand in this ever-changing and rapidly evolving environment. One of the things that people see, communication, is a big example. Communication and the ability to engender buy-in is a great example of what's sorely lacking from today's managers, right? Communications was rated as the most important skill by employers, but the dissatisfaction level between what employers are getting from employees and future hires, out of 15 skills that were evaluated, communications was a third worst skill when it came to dissatisfaction rates. Articulation of thought in verbal and written form is critical. And what we also find is that it doesn't really matter what you know technically. Employers are generally fine with that. It's not the technical or the hard skills that are as problematic for them. It's really the ability to articulate the impact and how to utilize those skills to create value. I like this chart on the left because it's just an illustrative example of, what poor communication can mean, right? And so if you think about candidate one and you think about this index of 100 knowledge points, if someone could have 100 points of knowledge, right? But if they can only communicate 25, someone with half as many knowledge points, but they can communicate everything they know, will look twice as smart, right? And this is just an example for communications, but I think this is the case for a lot of those skills that were on the prior slide from the QS survey that came out at the end of last year. And so with Korn Ferry, the leading search firm, executive search firm and talent organization, one of the leading ones in the world, they had done a couple of years ago, they had conducted a talent survey, right? And not only is there a lack of talent from some of the things that I've talked about earlier related to the aging workforce or the long gestation periods for human capital, but it's really these high premium skills. Folks that can innovate, create, manage, and apply are in super short supply. And these are typically the skills that people get at top-notch transformative MBA programs. In places like Japan and Indonesia, even though they're two completely different profiles, their talent gap is, predicted to be highly acute in a substantial range, double-digit, 8-digit ranges. China is going to struggle. And then even for the rest of the rest of Asia and Asia Pacific, you're going to see significant gaps as well. 0 to 6 million for places that are smaller is still substantial. And so, out of this, there's just a need for more generalists, right? People who can be deployed in many different ways because there is too much uncertainty in today's business environment. You need people with a broad range of skills. And one of the things that we see that where companies, make mistakes is that they mostly hire discipline skills in the early stages of the career, but where this really relates well to working professionals like yourself is that those hires eventually come to rely on generalist skills. And so if you can go into an organization with an already finely tuned set of generalist skills, that's going to bode well for your progression longer term in the organization. The other thing is that, without these kind of broad skills and generalist skills, the ideological reliance on a single perspective can be detrimental to one's career because, with the rapidly changing nature of the professional environment, employees need the ability to successfully navigate vague and poorly defined situations. And we see that in our organization all the time. As a startup, all the answers aren't really clear. So people have to be able to, come up with integrated kind of solutions that make impact and add value. The other thing is that, we see this through our approaches to learning in action and action learning, which are fundamental bulwarks of our full-time and our working professional curriculum. Employees skilled in numerous functions are more valuable to management. And why are they more valuable to management? Because management can dynamically adjust their roles and redeploy them. But at the same time, this isn't to poo-poo technical skills. People armed with analytical capability with a wide range of experiences and generalist skills will outperform domain-specific skills, people with only domain-specific skills. So for us, we're seeing clearly that there aren't enough generalists in Asia, and this creates an environment for the MBA to thrive and proliferate. So why make the investment and how will this impact your career? So the investment is super compelling. Industry norms, for working professional programs like ours, high potential, high quality programs, what we see is that salary increases between entering and exiting the program are at least 25%. That's the norm in the US. And that was also pretty consistent with what I saw during my time in Hong Kong. Another thing is that, coming out of the program, about 50% of students get promoted within the first 3 years after graduation, right? And that's in other programs, mostly top 100 Financial Times programs. However, in ASB, the results are even more compelling. In our first two classes, 2/3 of the students in the first cohort, and we have someone here today who will speak in the student panel, have been promoted before graduating, and 31% of the students in the second class that's just completing the first year have received a promotion, title change, or expansion of responsibilities. And so the impact, that folks are experiencing from our program is off the charts, and it's almost instantaneously while they're in the program. When you overlay our impact with some of the macro factors, if you look at the last 20 years, the ascent of Asian MBAs in the chart on the left, the value to the region has gone up to the point where they're outperforming international business schools. If you look on the chart on the right, it's the salaries of MBA cost of living adjusted salaries over time between MBA graduates in the USA, international, and Asia. And Asia is almost on par with the USA with salary. Additionally, though, what you'll see on the chart on the right is that the relative salary increase differences between Asian MBA programs and US MBA, Asian MBA programs, US MBA programs, and international MBA programs is substantial as well. As Asia becomes the critical growth driver for many companies, much of the talent that's coming over here, all sorts of international talent is coming over here because there's a lack of talent in the region, but it's also forecasting that there's a need for local talent as well to help kind of cultivate these growth opportunities in this part of the world. There's a McKinsey survey that talked about post-19 COVID sentiment, and the consumer sentiment in Asia is the highest in the world. Employers, typically what we've seen historically, having been in this business for the last 15 years, in crisis, it's not as much of the young talent that's getting displaced or struggling. What a lot of employers do is they use these opportunities to retrench and get rid of low performers. While they may moderate the hiring of new performers, there's still plenty of opportunities for individuals to grow and get promoted in the organization. At the end of the day, unique skills travel globally, high-end talent will always be rewarded, right? And the growth in MBA programs over the last 20 years, really reinforces the notion that there's a great need for talent in this part of the world. Further, what we've seen is, some of my research digs deeply into some of the trends over the last 10, 20 years. And what we've seen is that, the scarcity of talent and the high performance drive premium for top MBAs. So a lot of times in the research, when it comes to MBAs and such, you hear guys like Elon Musk say, oh, MBAs don't add value, MBAs this or that. But when you really look at the performance over time, it's indisputable. Not all MBAs are created equal, but for the top MBAs, the market, rewards them, right? And it's not, sometimes people say, oh, it's a signaling thing or it's a brand thing, but, the productivity comes first and then the brand comes second, right? And in Asia, many of you guys have worked here, for the last, decade or what have you. Asia doesn't pay people just to pay people. This has been our number one experience here. They pay people because of productivity and their ability to make an impact. This chart here, shows, it takes an analysis of Financial Times MBA rankings for full-time MBAs and working professionals, and we kind of stratified it by stage of, by region or stage of development. If you see on the top bar, you see Asia developing, Asia advanced, US, Europe. On the bottom for full-time MBA, you see the same thing. And then we overlay, we just recently completed a survey of our first two classes to compare some of our data with Financial Times MBA data for the two profiles, working professionals and full-time MBA students. And what you'll see is that while the trend is definitely that across all schools, Asia developing and Asia advanced are outperforming the US and Europe, what you see in our alumni is that our average salary of 16, our average annualized salary growth of 16% trumps everybody. And we think that's if you had a chance to come to some of our other info sessions where we talked about the curriculum, learning in action, our practicums, the fact that we have world-class faculty, the MIT faculty influence in the program, we feel like all these factors contribute to this kind of overperformance here. Beyond the annualized salary growth, the rates of promotion are super high. So we just have our first MBA-WP cohort. So we don't have any alumni data. So we're using some of our full-time data, but our expectation for the outcomes are the same. And so with the high promotion rates, high annualized salary growth, we feel like, the investment in our program is without peer. For those of you guys who are interested in financial aid, we're one of the few schools, top schools that provides financial aid. We're market leading on that dimension, and we feel really confident about our return on investment when it comes to what we bring to the table. Now, this is just some of the case for value, right? But I think we think there's no better way to talk about the value than to talk to some of our current students in the program. And so with that, we have two of our superstars, because we feel like our program not only makes an impact for career accelerators, but they also make an impact for entrepreneurs. And so we brought two of our top students to the program to kind of share their story. The first one, the entrepreneur, Matthew Roman, is a CEO of his own firm that has produced a cutting-edge cloud-based workflow, business intelligence software product that's leading the way in the Philippines with a global portfolio of clients. So Matthew, welcome. Thanks so much for coming out and participating. And then the career accelerator, Mervlin Ko. Mervlin's from Sapura Energy. He was a sponsored student who came to the program. He's working basically as the chief of staff for the CEO group. In the program, Mervlin's had 2 promotions in the organization. And so yeah, we've got 2 superstars here to kind of share their perspective about the transformative impact of the program. And what I'd like them to do is kind of give a little, tell a little bit of their story, who they are, where they went to school, how they kind of got to this point. So we'll start with Matt, and then we'll go to Mervlin as the elder statesman and graduate of the program.
Sure, Sean, thanks for that. So mine is kind of like the typical entrepreneurial story. I wanted to be an entrepreneur ever since I was 7 years old, Sean. So I was kind of like planning my entire life for the moment when I put up my own business. And even though that was the case where I tried to really prepare, even in high school and college, when I became an entrepreneur when I was 23, I found out that wow, there's so much stuff I don't know, right? So after like going through a decade of being an entrepreneur by myself, the more stuff I learned, the more I realized that there's a lot of things that I still have to learn, right? And not just like best practices, but also kind of like, how do you see things from different perspectives? So when COVID hit, all businesses were struggling and everything. I kind of saw that as an opportunity, right? To upgrade my skills and to like put my business into the next level. So it was a long journey for me. I mean, I was looking into MBAs even before COVID, but when COVID happened, that's when I started really engaging again. And what I realized was that we are living in unprecedented times, and I need an unprecedented MBA. So ASB was kind of like the perfect match for me. I mean, people ask me sometimes, is ASB the best MBA out there? They say, there's no really best MBA, but there's an best MBA for you. And it just so happens that for me, it is ASB, being unconventional, stemming from best practices, but applying it quite differently, quite uniquely in, today's actual circumstances. So here I am, a year later, and learning so much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing some perspective on your story. Mervlin, give us the deal, Mr. Graduate.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, I'm Melvin. I work for Sakura Energy. Like Sean mentioned, I recently just graduated from the first batch of the working professionals. It's quite an interesting journey for me because I think I started off when I joined the program. I came from a project management background, and before that was an engineer. So coming from that background, you always think like, I want to do an MBA, but to broaden my horizons, not just be stuck in that little box of just managing projects and doing just very technical engineering tasks. So, but at the same time, like works, career growth, it's quite good. You don't think about whether you want to leave the company because they've been treating you well, but at the same time, most great MBAs out there require you to leave your job for 2 years at least. So when this opportunity came up, I just went for it. Yeah.
So, one of the questions is that there's a proliferation of MBAs out there, lots of great schools, all shapes and sizes. Why ASB? What was the driving factor for you to consider this program? For in your case, Matthew, you're in the Philippines, right? Mervlin, you were already having a great career at Sephora. Maybe it's more work than needed with your current career arc. Want to just get some insights as why you thought this might be the best fit for you and how it would change the course of your career.
Sure. Did you want me to take that, Sean?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of like a hard question to answer, right? A one simple statement. But I mean, essentially, I was looking at a lot of different MBA programs then, and I'm not one to actually go and avoid the schools that have my weaknesses. For example, if I really want to beef up my finance skills, because that's my weakness. I mean, I would prefer to go to like a finance or an MBA with a finance concentration. But when everything kind of shifted with the global economy, right? I wanted to also kind of figure out a strategy wherein how do we make it so that when all the companies in the world are underperforming because of these difficult economic conditions, how do I make it so that my business actually thrives and performs well during this time, right? And that kind of leads back to our ethos on a focus on operations management, in the sense being a generalist, but not necessarily just being a jack of all trades, but being a master of everything, but more so being good at managing everything and making everything synergize together. Out of all the MBAs I've checked from Europe, US, and Asia, ASB was really the only school that kind of has a focus on that. Focus on not just doing really well at your job, but being excellent at managing everything else and making sure everything works perfectly together. I think that's a very good explanation of what the ASB generalist is, and it's really more of an ops standpoint as well. So running a startup, that's kind of what you have to do every day. You wear 10 different hats, from sunrise to sunset and even through the night. And that just kind of gives me all the skill set I need to make sure that even if the economy is struggling, we're thriving, and thankfully that's the case for us.
Fantastic. Mervlin.
Always very inspiring to hear from Matthew. I think for my case, even though I was sponsored, but even before applying for that scholarship, I was also looking around for MBAs. And I think when I was looking for something around the region, because I want to stay close to home and my job, there were a few names that popped up. Then I think I do reach out to a few key people that I do know. One of it was a VP for Pemandu. And then I also reached out to a former ex-student of ASB. and both of them gave really good reviews on ASB. And I think in addition to that, coming from an engineering background, knowing it's affiliated with MIT makes it even more appealing. You know, knowing that how well MIT is with their work. And at the same time, still have ASB being this sort of startup MBA where there's a lot more flexibility. There's also very close relationships that I've heard before that on how they communicate with their professors, how they talk and interact with the staff of ASB. I think that really attracted me to join ASB.
All right, outstanding. And so, you know, you guys have picked ASB, right, as your MBA of choice. But what were your expectations when you came into the program? I know when I was going through the MBA process, what I thought and what I got were totally different, and I was totally thrilled, even though it was totally different than what I thought. And I wanted to get your reflections on, you know, what were you expecting coming to the program? Were those met? But then also how your expectations may have evolved and, you know, helped you consider things that you may have never considered before.
Maybe I could take that one. Hey, since I just graduated, I could reflect back on that journey. I think when I first started with the MBA program, what I had in mind was, you know, doing work and study at the same time. I thought my career would actually take a step back, take a back seat, and I'll focus more on studying. And I thought only once I graduate, then I would go and sit down with HR and my managers and start discussing about my career plan. But I think what I learned was that that's not the way things happen. In fact, it was in between studying and all that it was actually through the action learning projects. I think Sean would talk a bit more on the action learning later on, that I started to be more visible to the senior management. I think that was how I started getting more roles and responsibilities. So it was also mentioned that during this time, I actually had 2 promotions within my, even before graduating from my MBA. So it was through that I realized that, you know, hey, nothing really goes as planned and got to start running with it. Matt?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, you kind of have like these crazy expectations, right? When it comes to an MBA, and more so an international MBA, ASB being, you know, a school in collaboration with MIT Sloan. I kind of had like the craziest expectations, but I mean, even despite that, all the expectations were broken on the first week of class. You know, the first week in ASB is the craziest, hardest week ever. So, but you kind of expect to learn new tools, and tools that just kind of make you a better businessman or a better manager or a better, you know, analyst or whatnot. But what was so unexpected for me was that it's not just so much as being better as who you are now, but actually making different versions of you. And this is what we call the lenses, right, Sean, wherein you see things from an Asian lens, you see things from a global lens, you see things from a financial lens, you see things from a stakeholder lens, from a communications lens, and all those things. You kind of like become, you know, different experts of yourself. And that's kind of like the most shocking thing for me. Before I would like have my own strategy, and I talk to my finance person and I ask him, what do you think? And I kind of have to go through and talk to everyone. But now I can communicate better with these different types of stakeholders. I can understand them better. I can formulate strategies that are more cohesive. And it's hard to explain it to you now, but when you go through the ASB experience, it will just, you know, sort of like click after your first sem. And those expectations, even if I'm explaining it to you, you fully really appreciate and reflect it once you, you know, undergone this transformative experience. and I'm still going through it, right? So a lot of things are still new, but just from the first few weeks alone, I could say you'd be a different person.
So one of the things that you said, Matt, is that you've gotten all these different skills, right? And it sounds like, you're kind of able to translate, your impact and scale through people a lot more because of your, the broadening of your skills and such. Has that been the case in your organization, right?
Yeah, you know, I'm an introvert, Sean, so communicating with people is something I've learned to adopt into, but not really, I would say, like the thing that makes my day, right? So, one of our best professors here always says, right, the job is easy, people are not. And it was like, okay, another catchphrase, whatever. But, when you really understand what that means and it clicks for you, you'll understand why some people talk the language of money, some people talk the language of things. You understand why this person is more conservative and why this person is more risk-taking. You know how to present the same strategy to different people so they'll have buy-in. You know how to talk to your board of directors. You know how to talk to your customer. Like you said, Sean, right? I mean, you can have the best strategy in the world. If nobody buys into it, then you might as well have nothing. And that's one of our courses, right? Communications, we go through this. So yeah, absolutely. I learn everything. If you don't learn comms, might as well learn nothing, I think.
So Mervin, so when you think about your ability to scale your impact through people, how has this experience kind of helped you?
I think I echo what Matthew said about the whole ASB experience, because that really does help shape you and help train you on not just the way you think, but the way you actually behave and present and communicate things. Allow me to share my story. I think coming from a project management, managing teams offshore out at sea, it's got a lot to do with the hierarchy of your job position. So there's a lot. It's quite military in a way on how we do things and how we communicate to our teams offshore. But I think once you move that into a corporate setting, that really does change. And I think that's what ASB has helped me to better manage. I think to be able to go from that environment and into, let's say, presenting something to different CEOs or negotiating with vendors or trying to pitch an idea to one of the big oil and gas companies in Malaysia. I think that's not something you could just learn while doing your job. I think you really do need to experience the ASB environment to see what you need to work at and what would actually be applicable for your job. So that's the biggest change for me in dealing with people, like from the offshore environment to now the corporate environment.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Before I go to one of the other questions, I wanted to go to some of the questions that are in the chat. And so Lu Kwan asked, how did your teams, given the learning perspective, the experience you had translating the learning into meaningful impact, how did your teams in the workplace react to the kind of new you? Let's start with you, Mervin.
That's a good question. To be honest, people don't really go like, oh, you've got an MBA, so now what's new, right? It's a lot to do with, I think it still comes down to how you perform at work, and definitely the skills on how you present to them and how you hear them out and come out with solutions. So the great thing about ASB is, like, we have these things like called action learning and practicums, where you have a safe environment to actually experiment and learn all these skills and see what actually works for you, and like maybe your management style, your communication style. So by the time you get to your workplace, you are familiar with your work culture, your work environment. And once you put that into practice and keep on doing it week after week, people actually do start noticing those difference rather than, having to, it's not a switch that you just turn on and off. People gradually start seeing that change, and that change people might not directly relate it to your MBA, but they do relate it to, you as a person, as Melvin or as Matt at work. Yeah.
So Matt, I think this question is really interesting for you because you're everyone's boss. How do they respond to you with an MBA, or you going through this MBA process?
Yeah, sure. The hard thing about being the boss is you're kind of like the boss of everyone at the office, but then every client you have also is kind of like your boss. So you're kind of like juggling 20 bosses, and then being the person that everyone might be afraid to speak against, right? So obviously we try to create a culture where everyone can collaborate and everything. But I think one of the best things about it is, I kind of have a renewed appreciation for the different perspectives of everyone at the office, because I can understand and relate better to where they're coming from. It's not about like, I'm right, you're wrong, he's right and I'm wrong. I mean, we could be both right, but still be wrong, right? In terms of the business, in terms of the strategy. All these different perspectives, how you stitch them together, kind of like really creates a good appreciation, because it's not just about learning how to manage things outside, but one of the interesting things that I went through with Jules was self-reflection as well, knowing better about yourself, what triggers you, what your intuition, are they correct? What's your natural inclination to things? How do you manage yourself and your intuition better, and knowing when you're right, when to listen, when to apply cognitive thinking, all those things, Sean, that kind of, it sounds crazy when you try to do everything all at once, those things I just mentioned, but at ASB, you're kind of like forced to do it, right? So yeah, it gets easier day by day, but overall, it just makes you, I think, a better leader by being also a better listener and a better follower at that.
So what do your clients say when you say, oh yeah, I'm doing an MBA, or I'm actually going to be out of pocket for a period of time? What's their response?
Oh, I mean, meetings have become a lot shorter. That's absolutely the truth, because I kind of am able to profile clients a little bit better now. I know if this person always talks the language of things, I know how to shift into that. Some people talk the language of money. So I think the clients have a really great appreciation of that. In fact, they ask a lot about like the stuff that we learn here. Where do these best practices stem from? I've had a lot of clients, Sean, that actually inquire about short courses because they just want to learn more about something I discussed with them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, even the very senior bosses and clients and heads of conglomerates here in my country are super interested. So yeah.
Thanks for that. So Ryan asked a question, and I think a lot of people struggle with this one. Like, should I do the WP program or should I do the traditional MBA program? And so I'd like to hear your point of view as WP students on the differences between the two. And I know everyone has more pride in their program than the other program, but let's give a balanced view on your perspective on the two programs, and how potential applicants should think about them. Mervin?
Okay, I'm just going to be very frank here. Whether you're doing the WP or you're doing the full-time program, I think we're doing almost the same amount of workload. That means if you're doing the WP, you're not shortchanged in any way, right? In terms of what you're getting out from ASB. There might be small changes here and there, such as our action learning projects, but the objectives for each of these courses will still be the same. The advantage for the WP is that while you are studying, you're also working. So whatever you learn in that intense 1 or 2 weeks, it's still very fresh in your mind, and you could actually go out and do it at work. Or in fact, sometimes there are times like we learn something during our night classes. The next day at work, I do have a few colleagues who are also taking the program. We bounce ideas off in the meeting with different bosses, and then they bring up real world issues. And the advantage is that we could still go back and highlight this to the professor to say that how do we deal with situations like this. So it's something that I do find as something very practical that you can do. So you're not distancing yourself out from the workforce or the work environment, but you're still studying. But definitely the downside to that is that you don't get enough sleep. You're just studying and working at the same time.
Anything to add, Matthew?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. Yeah, it's absolutely the same education. I mean, a lot of people asked me before and said that, hey, is WP like the kind of like the diet version of the MBA? So absolutely not. You're going to the same classes as the full times and all those things. I guess just a little bit more flexibility in the sense that there are some courses that you can choose not to take. But if you want the same experience, then you just take everything the same way that the full-timers do. And the schedule permits that for WPs. It's not really an issue. But I guess in a way, you might say, right, full-time is more theory and WP is more practice because we're working. But in ASB, we do action learning. So it's practice either way. Whether you're full-time or WP, you're going to have that. The main difference is you get to apply your coursework to your current job versus you apply that into a sponsored company, right? So it's, for me, Sean, when people ask me like, should I go to WP? It's kind of like a question for me, a question I ask them as well. Like, who do you want your classmates to be? Do you want all your classmates to be full-timers? Do you want them to be, more like honing their skills and whatnot, or do you want everyone to be working professionals? And it's kind of like a very preference specific or a personal preference specific thing. So in my case, I just always prefer to be a WP.
So I think, and to kind of add to what you guys have said, two programs thematically are intended to deliver the same learning outcomes. But, what I would say is that for the working professionals program, these are typically for, entrepreneurs, established entrepreneurs, and, career accelerators, right? So if you're trying to kind of pivot within your organization to different kind of roles, to kind of, a lot of us, like in Mervin's case, he's an engineer, right? Now he's broadening to support the CEO office and that kind of thing. But he's still in the oil and gas industry. And so I think the pivot's less. Or Matthew, he has an enterprise and, he's trying to enhance, a multi-industry cloud-based product, right? He's already in the process of that. Whereas I think students in the full-time program are looking to make starker changes in their career, right? Not just broadening from, engineering to see more of the organization, but maybe you have an engineer who wants to be a product, manager in the future, or a nurse who wants to be a management consultant, right, or something like that. And I think while, they're cousins for sure, but like the outcome at the end is different. So in the evenings, full-time students have to do things to prepare for the significant scale of the career change, while WPs in the evenings have to figure out how to take what they learned and put it into the work for tomorrow, right? And so it's just a little bit different. So And so I think Deanie, he asked the point, does taking the WP program, is it a good for choice for a career switch? And I think in both programs, you can kind of accomplish what are accomplished in the other program. But I think, you know, these modes that I tell you is it's mostly career changers and entrepreneurs in the full-time, and it's mostly career switch. I mean, in the WP, and in the full-time, it's mostly career switchers, but we have some career switchers in the WP, right? And we have some career accelerators in the full-time program. So just, you know, a general, and you know, the good thing is that in both programs, the outcomes have been very strong as they relate to the career. So hopefully that answered your question, Deanie.
Sean, could I add on to that?
Yeah.
Maybe to also answer Deanie's question. I think one more thing, Deanie, that you could consider with the full-time program that's different from the WP is that for the full-time program, every action learning, you get to work with a different sponsor. So a different sponsor company might expose you to a totally different new industry, and you get to do, if I'm not mistaken, 4 of these action learning projects. And there would be still some other courses that's not called action learning, like your practicums and all, where you do get to engage with different types of sponsors. So maybe in this sense, if you're still unsure which direction you want to pivot your career, the full-time program does give you that opportunity to try. Whereas for the WPs, you're mostly running things within your company. Yeah.
That's a great point, Mervin. I think you take what you learn here and you put it into your work and sphere of professional influence in the WP, whereas, you know, there is a little bit more experimentation in the full-time program because they get to do different projects for companies. But then the practicums in the WP program give you a platform to also learn best practices from other industries. So you still get that. So there's still a little bit of everything in both programs. Let's see. So this is a good question, right? What are the main challenges you faced, you know, in trying to juggle between the WP program and your day-to-day work so that you don't get fired or anything like that?
Did you want to take that, Mervin?
Okay, I could take that, but I'd love to hear what a CEO thinks about that. I think for my end, because I'm kept coming from maybe a project management position and moving forward from there, I think the biggest challenge other than time and sleep, which you'll experience whether you're in the full-time or the WP program, is actually managing your team that's underneath you and also managing your superiors, because they might be informed. The school does their best to inform them what's their expectations out of us. But I think when things really do pop out of nowhere, that you do still have to step in and manage it. So you do have to think about how your team can manage it, and at the same time, manage expectations of your superiors, especially on times when you're not in the office. Yeah. So I think those are some of the challenges you have to deal with throughout your 2 years. Not just speak to them at the beginning, but at like every phase of your study. There might be peak periods, there might be time you need to take time off, that you do need to discuss these issues.
Yeah, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right, Melvin? I mean, in my case, after my first actual learning project, I was able to cut down like a loss generating activity in our office by 80%, right? Just by doing that one project, I was able to ROI my tuition per first sem. Just by progressing through ASB, you kind of become more efficient. So it kind of gives you this false sense that, oh, I have more time. But it kind of also tells you there's just so much more that you can do. The best thing I learned for for applying time management into my schoolwork and my career and everything, even personal life, is a CBA, or cost benefit analysis. Is this activity worth doing? If it's not, let's not do it. So it's kind of always like that. You become more efficient, so you got to do more things, but the more things you know, you want to do more things. So it really is about figuring out what creates the best impact for you. And if you survive first sem, I don't think it's going to be a big issue for you. You'll learn how to balance stuff. You'll know more about yourself and what your capabilities are. And Sean, ASB has always been very, open to communication. I mean, I speak to Jules and Nabila if there's a scheduling conflict. So it's not so crazy. I mean, it is crazy that you don't sleep, but it's not crazy that it's impossible. I hope I didn't scare people off because of that.
You got plenty time to sleep after the program, right, Mervin? So one of the things, we're coming to a close here, and I have two questions. I'm gonna, do a double barrel question at you, you two. And so what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, to kind of further increase the impact of, the MBA on your career? And like, what's next for you, like in the long term? Like how, I think, a lot of MBAs, when they go through this, they see all these different classes, they realize, a whole new universe of opportunities. How are you thinking about what's next for you as well? So what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, to get more value out of it and better prepare yourself for it? And then what's next for you? So let's start with Mervin, since he's the elder statesman.
I think looking back, I think it's definitely the informal education part. The formal education part is compulsory. You got to attend your classes, you got to submit all your assignments and all. But I believe the informal part, if I could do differently, I think I would spend more time with the classmates. I spend a lot of time with the working professionals. When you sit down with all these really experienced people and people you look up to, and actually hear what they actually do in their companies based on what they learn, because everyone takes home something differently from every lesson. I think I would do more of that, and together with the full-timers, because only towards the end of my studies, I started spending more and more time with the full-timers, and to realize that they have so much ideas, and they get to try out different startups, try out different things in the industry, that there's also so much to learn from them. I think that's the informal education that I would definitely do a bit differently. What's next is, I think I'm still quite new to this role as the chief of staff for the group CEO. So I think it's a learning process to see how everything could, whatever I've learned could be put into practice even more. And part of it was actually, we are working quite closely, Sapura with ASB, that I'm actually looking to work closely with Saif, who's also in this call, on how we could democratize some of the programs in Asia School of Business to the employees in Sapura. So it's always this learning process that doesn't just quite stop when I end my MBA.
Matthew, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, to further maximize the value? And then you're already a CEO, but what's next for you?
Sure. Yeah, I really share the same sentiment with Mervin. I don't know if you're just sentimental because you graduated 3 days ago, but 4 days ago. But yeah, I mean, if I could do it all over again, I would have spent more time with my seniors. And now I'm the senior, so it's kind of like shocking. They tell you that, oh, we're graduating in May, and I was like, yeah, that's a year ahead, and then suddenly it's next week. But I think it might sound sentimental, but it's really one of the biggest things, because these are super smart people and with really awesome insights. And it's not just about the school, but it's also about the people who attend with you. ASB takes in the best of the best. You get into ASB, you're learning with the best. So don't undervalue that situation. Don't make the same mistake. But when it comes to what's next, Sean, it's about going international, right? It's like what our dean says. There's no such thing as a local business. And how do you take a startup from a small company into an international multinational company? How do we conquer Southeast Asia and Asia and the rest of the world? That's the awesome different kinds of lenses that I learned here at ASB, being an international school, studying with an international set of cohort. But and that's something that's scary, but I think we can definitely do. So that's really what I'm excited for.
Well, that's awesome, gentlemen. I really appreciate the perspective that you provide. I want to kind of add a few things to what you've said, and I think one of the points you made, Matthew, you talked about the international aspiration that you had, and I think this environment supports an international aspiration. About 30% of our WP students are from outside of Malaysia. So within the WP program, you get that kind of internationalism. But then for all of our MIT courses, the full-time and WP students get a chance to take classes together. And I think, that enriches the process as well, right? And so, 70% of our full-time students are international. But then the other thing that's great, and one of the things that you're really buying into when you go to a world-class school like this is the kind of network that you're getting. And so we have a diverse international network, and then our degree is globally portable. So for our first two classes, 47% of our alums are outside of Asia across 34 different countries. So one, that means you're getting a really great network. But the other thing is that the skills and things that you learn here are portable globally. And Asia is not just relevant in Asia, it's relevant in Europe, it's relevant in the US, because as we talked about earlier, everyone's growth agenda is focused on this part of the world. And so we really appreciate Mervlin and Matthew for kind of helping us articulate our story and the impact from a career perspective. And we really hope to see you guys. Our last application deadline is June 16th. Additionally, we still have financial aid for everyone. Our scholars, our deferred payment and COVID-19 discount are still in effect. 100% of the people who have applied for financial aid have received some form of award. And so feel free to check us out. Mervlin has just dropped his LinkedIn. We have this saying here, there's a one-letter difference between networking and not working. So connect with Mervlin and, and connect with me as well. And, Matt is always easy to get to as well. So thank you guys so much for your time. We hope you enjoyed the info session. Also, the QR code here, you can schedule a call with me if you need to, all right? And Matthew's on Unibuddy, so you can get direct access to him via the website, all right? Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and enjoy the holiday tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, Sean. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mervin. Awesome seeing you again.
All right.